You think there aren't any fish there? How about that? 1, 2, 3, 6 fish there. 6 small silverfish. One of them's definitely a gudgeon. There's roach in there, I think. And the other perch are there chasing those. Well, good morning. It is a December morning. It's a bit chilly and we are faced with a very fast rising river. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to share with you some of the tips and tricks that we've picked up over the many years of fishing flooded rivers like this. Now, if you was fishing a match, you wouldn't be able to choose your peg, but the location of where you actually fish is so important. The peg that I'm faced with today is one that I have been able to select. As you can see, we've got some dead water just here, and that is a great slack now. The slack has got bigger as the session's gone on because the river has literally risen over a foot in 2 hours. We've also got some dead water over there as well, which could be ideal for targeting fish, and there could be some fish over there. However, I've got the kit with me to fish that far bank dead water. I've got big rods with me, I've got plenty of leads with me, plenty of big feeders. However, in order for me to fish over there, you've literally got to have your line going through the main flow across the middle of the river. And today that is incredibly messy with trees and just debris that's getting washed downstream. So whilst we've got the kit to tackle that area over there, we just can't fish it because the feeder is literally only in there for about a minute before the line is just covered in debris. So whilst you might think the fish are over there, unfortunately, in a situation like this, you're just not able to tackle that water. So on a peg like this, it would be all about this near side. One thing that we always do in situations like this is actually mark the level of the water. Now, you might have an idea of what the water level is going to do throughout your session. You might know if it's going to be rising. It depends on the rain that you've had in the catchment area of that river. But obviously, for safety reasons and for your own information as an angler, it's good to know if you know whether the river is staying at its level that it's at or whether it's rising or dropping. So the first thing we always do is when we get to the peg, my box here, as you can see now, it's on level with the water. Now, 2 hours ago, the top 2 rings of my net were out of the water. And that's how much it's come up in the last 2 hours. So that's why, if it is going to be rising, just position your box back a little bit. And the other thing that we do is we always get a stick and stick it in the edge of the water just like that. That way, whilst I'm sat here on the box fishing away, I can constantly look at that, and that's going to give me a constant guide of whether the water is dropping or whether it's actually still coming up. It's just a safety issue. Safety is massive on venues like this. Another thing as regards safety is that there are platforms here. There is a platform directly in front of me. I could see that platform when I got here, and what I've done is I've positioned my box directly behind that platform. And that's because if anything did go wrong or my box went forward or I went in, it means that I'm going in on top of the actual platform and not down a big deep hole where it's about 7 or 8 feet deep into the abyss. Safety is massive. I'm here on my own today, so if anything happened, nobody would know. So always think about safety first. More often than not, when you're faced with situations like this, the river, as it's rising, is naturally more and more coloured. As you can see today, it's heavily coloured, and you can see how these are white maggots. Just watch how quick they disappear. Gone. And that's really close in. If we go out there, gone. So it's really coloured. So what you've got to think about is that fish in conditions like this, when the water's coloured, rely on sight much less. Just like we do on commercial fisheries, just like we do on still waters. So when the rivers are like this is when worm can really come into its own. Lots of people know about fishing with lobworms when the river's up, when you're fishing for bigger fish. Just think that the fish are going to have to rely on smell a lot more. So you might want to go down the route, like many people do, of going down a smellier ground bait mix. So it might be a mix that's slightly stronger from what you normally do. It could even be a lighter colour, so it stands out in that dark coloured water. But also think about the worm, chop worms, because all the juice, the scent, the smell, that is going to let the fish find your bait much quicker rather than just relying on sight. Quite often in these conditions you're quite simply just trying to catch a fish, you're trying to get a bite. And if you're fishing team matches or you're fishing leagues or anything like that, then obviously if you can catch a fish and avoid the blank, that can be massive. Now lots of people know about the pole feeder. That can be an incredibly effective way of fishing in these conditions. But what happens if you haven't got your pole with you? What happens if it's a feeder only competition? Well, there's one way that we used to fish close in like this on rivers like the Trent, where we used to fish and target gudgeon and perch really close in. And all we do is with a 12-foot rod or a 13-foot rod, simply by positioning your feeder rest or your feeder arm in the position I've got it in there, you can wind the feeder up like I have got there, okay? And all we're going to do is, that is actually dead water underneath that feeder there. It's completely still, it's a slack. So once I've got my feeder there in place with the bait on, I can simply bite wind the feeder down until it hits the bottom, and then when it hits the bottom I could just set my tip perfectly like that, and I can watch the tip for a bite there. And that can be a great way of catching small fish. It's an incredibly accurate way of fishing because you're simply lowering that feeder down onto the same spot every time. And with a nice 12-foot rod like this one, it's just the right distance from the bank where, you know, you're just far enough out from the bank where you've got a bit of depth, but it's not in that main flow. And this can be a brilliant way for catching species like gudgeon. And another great advantage of fishing like this is that if you do hook any really big fish, then because you've hooked them on a rod and line, then you might stand a much better chance of landing those fish than what you might have done if you'd hooked them on the pole. And above everything else, when you are faced with a peg like this, when you've got slack water like this, believe that the fish are there, okay? You honestly don't believe they're in that fast flowing water out there. Why would they be out there fighting that fast flowing current? Even if you haven't had a bite, believe the fish are there. I've literally just gone down the edge with my landing net, and there we go. That is literally from the end of my keep net. There are loads of fish in that slack water. I mean, look how many's there. That's one little scoop. Fantastic to see the small fish in the river like that. But believe me, the fish will be there. You've got to believe they're there. If you believe they're there, you're going to keep ringing the changes and you're going to stick at it. That's the main thing. But that's just one scoop down this margin. Imagine how many fish there must be out there. You think there aren't any fish there? How about that? And those perch are going to be chasing the smaller fry. Oh, here. That's just one scoop. 1, 2, 3, 6 fish there. 6 small silverfish. One of them's definitely a gudgeon. There's roach in there, I think. And the other perch are there chasing those. The fish are there. Rivers can be very challenging at this time of year, especially when there's extra water in them. So I hope there's been 1 or 2 tips here that are going to help you catch a few more fish this winter.